The wind howled through the hills as Leora walked beside the caravan, her pale hair shining like a ghost in the dim light of dusk. She wrapped her thin cloak tighter around her shoulders, though it could not hide the paleness of her skin or the redness of her eyes from crying. She had known fear all her life, but today it felt sharper, heavier. Her parents had looked at her with cold eyes that morning. The same parents who had once held her close and whispered her name with love now only saw shame. "She is different," her father had said, his voice tight with anger and worry. "No one in the village will accept her. We cannot keep her." And so they had sold her to a merchant who promised care and opportunity. But as the caravan rattled along the forest road, Leora felt only the emptiness of betrayal. Every shadow seemed to mock her, every whisper of the wind a cruel reminder that she belonged nowhere. The forest around them darkened, the trees arching over the path like silent, watchful giants. Leora shivered, her heart quickening. Stories of the northern woods filled her mind. The tales of wolves white as snow, fierce and untouchable, led by a king feared even by the bravest hunters. She tried to shake the fear, but it clung to her like a shadow she could not escape. Then she saw them. A pair of glowing eyes appeared in the underbrush, then another, then several more. The caravan froze. Horses whinnied and stamped the ground. Leora's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen wolves like these, pure white, their fur almost glowing in the dim light, moving with an intelligence that seemed almost human. And then he appeared. The largest of them, taller and broader than any wolf she had ever imagined, stepped forward. Its eyes were pale, almost silver, and they pierced through her, as if reading every secret she had ever held. The wolf tilted its head, watching her with an intensity that made her knees tremble. And then, as if by magic, the wolf changed. His fur melted into a cloak of white. His shape grew taller, stronger, until a man stood before her. Broad-shouldered, powerful, and yet moving with a grace that seemed almost unreal. His hair was as white as the snow-covered mountains, his eyes sharp and penetrating. He was the White Alpha King of the northern forests, the man the legend spoke of in hushed tones. "You are far from home," he said, his voice deep, calm, yet carrying an undeniable command. "Who are you, child of pale light?" Leora stepped back, fear and awe warring inside her. She could not speak. Her voice had vanished. The caravan's guards, unsure of what they faced, hesitated, their hands on their weapons. But Kyle, the Alpha King, did not move toward them. He only looked at her. I am Leora," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. I am being sold. Sold. The word felt small and meaningless in her mouth, but she could see the understanding flash in his eyes. He did not flinch. He did not judge. "You are chosen," Kale said simply. "Chosen by something greater than fear." She blinked, unsure she had heard him right. "Chosen?" "Yes," he replied. "Come. If you walk with me, you may yet find your strength. But if you remain with them..." His gaze swept over the caravan, cold as ice. "You will be lost to this world." The caravan guards hesitated, but the fear in their eyes was clear. Even they knew they could not fight the White Alpha King. Leora took a trembling step forward, unsure why she obeyed. Yet every instinct in her body told her to trust him. She had never felt safety in a single human before, but somehow in his presence it was possible. The wolves parted, and Kyle lowered his hand. Leora stepped closer, feeling a strange warmth in her chest despite the cold night. Her fear did not vanish, it had not yet, but it was tempered by a sense of belonging she had never known. As they moved deeper into the forest, Kyle spoke of his pack, his tone almost wistful. "We are cursed," he said. "My family was bound to this land, isolated and feared. No one may join us unless their heart is free from fear and prejudice. You, child, may hold the key." Leora shivered. "A curse?" He nodded. "Yes, but do not mistake it for weakness. Strength and pain often walk together. You may have been born into the shadow, but you are not meant to stay there." She looked at him, unsure how to respond. She had been born different, marked by her albinism as if it were a crime, but no one had ever spoken to her with such calm certainty. No one had ever offered her a chance to be more than shame. The night deepened. The forest seemed alive, the whispers of the trees like voices speaking secrets in a language she could almost understand. Leora felt her fear and doubt clashing with something new, a flicker of hope. Then the sound of men shouting shattered the fragile calm. The caravan had been pursued. Hunters, greedy and cruel, were moving through the forest aiming to capture her for profit. Stay behind me, Kale commanded, and suddenly the air shifted. His wolves, moving as one, formed a protective circle around them. Leora's heart raced, but it was no longer from fear alone. There was awe, too, and the first stirrings of trust. The hunters attacked, arrows whistling through the air. Kale moved like a storm, his strength unmatched, but there were too many. He fought with precision, but Leora saw the strain in his movements. One arrow glanced too close to her, and she stumbled back into the shadows, separated from him in the chaos. Panic gripped her, but as she ran, she felt a strange presence guiding her, almost as if the forest itself wanted her safe. She had never felt anything like it. An invisible hand, a silent promise that she was not alone. When she turned a bend, she saw him again. Kyle, fighting with a fury that seemed more than human, keeping the wolves and men at bay. But then in a flash, a hunter lunged forward. Leora screamed and ran toward him, but the ground beneath her gave way, a hidden pit set to trap prey. She fell. Kale's shout echoed through the trees. Leora! She tumbled into darkness, the night swallowing her, and for the first time she felt truly alone. Yet even in the blackness she felt a pull, a tether connecting her to Kale. She could not see him, but she could feel his presence, as if the threads of their fates were entwined. Above her, Kale fought back the hunters, but even he could not reach her in time. His hands, pale as moonlight and strong as iron, reached toward her anyway, though he knew the forest had claimed her for a moment, and then, silence, the hunters retreated, their courage broken by the fury of the White Alpha King. The forest returned to stillness, but Leora was gone. Kale stood alone, his chest heaving, eyes scanning the darkness where she had vanished. His wolves circled him, growling softly, sensing his turmoil. He whispered her name into the night. Leora, I will find you. The words floated on the wind, carrying a promise, a warning, and a hope. Somewhere in the shadows she listened. Somewhere in the cold, dark forest their destinies were linked, stronger than fear, stronger than the curse that bound him. And so, the night held its breath. The forest was silent except for the soft rustling of leaves. Leora woke slowly, her body aching from the fall, but her spirit stronger than she expected. She was alone, yet the strange feeling of being watched, protected, lingered. Somewhere in the shadows, Kale was near. She could feel it, a thread connecting them that distance and darkness could not break. She stood, brushing dirt and leaves from her cloak. Fear still gripped her heart. But it was no longer the same fear she had felt when her parents had rejected her. This was a different fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of discovering her own power. For the first time, she realized something extraordinary. The wolves of the northern forest, the very creatures that had once terrified her, seemed calm around her. Their eyes reflected trust, almost reverence. You can do this, she whispered to herself. You are stronger than they think. Meanwhile, Kale moved silently through the trees, every sense alert. The hunters had fled, but he could not rest. Leora's absence was a hollow ache, a pull he could not ignore. His mind replayed the moment she had fallen, the image burned into his memory. He had to find her, alive, safe, unbroken. As he followed the faint traces of her passage, Kyle sensed something more than her footsteps. There was a pulse in the air, faint but distinct, a connection that called to him. It was as if her presence, fragile and luminous, was guiding him through the forest. Hours passed and the night deepened. Leora, meanwhile, had discovered a hidden grove filled with silver-leaved trees, their branches glowing faintly under the moonlight. The grove felt alive, almost magical, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her. The stories Kale had spoken of, the forest, the wolves, the magic, were not just stories. She was a part of this world, and the forest seemed to recognize it. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of the grove. Leora froze, her heart leaping. A figure stepped forward from the darkness. Kyle. His white hair glowed like moonlight, his eyes searching hers. Relief flooded through her, and for the first time she ran toward him without fear. Leora, he said, his voice low, almost tender. Are you unharmed? She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. I think so. But the forest, it feels different. Alive. Kale's gaze softened, and he reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. That is because it is. And so are you. You are stronger than you realize, Leora. That strength is what may save us both. Together, they began their journey deeper into the forest. guided by the mysterious magic that seemed to recognize Leora as its own. She felt her fear slowly fade, replaced by determination. She was no longer just the girl who had been sold and abandoned. She was Leora, chosen by fate, and she would not be broken again. As they walked, Cale shared more of his past, his voice a quiet echo against the rustling leaves. He spoke of his family, the curse that bound his pack, and the loneliness that had defined his life. Leora listened, understanding now that his strength came not just from his power but from the weight of his responsibility. She saw the man behind the Alpha King, a man capable of love yet afraid of it. "You have nothing to fear from me," Leora said softly. "I will not leave you." Cale's eyes met hers, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, longing, trust, and a growing bond that neither could deny. But their reunion was not meant to be peaceful. The hunters, defeated but not destroyed, had regrouped and were waiting near the edge of the forest. Their greed had only grown, and they intended to claim Leora once and for all. Cale sensed the danger before they reached it. His wolves stirred, growling low and warning him. Leora felt a surge of power within her, a connection to the forest that had guided her. She instinctively reached out with her hands, and the silver-leaved trees around them responded, branches twisting to block the hunter's path. "Leora," Kyle called, awe and pride in his voice. "Focus, trust yourself." The hunters attacked, but Leora and Cale fought as one. Cale's strength and the wolves' precision were unmatched, but Leora's presence had changed the balance. She moved with a calm confidence, the forest itself aiding her. Arrows missed, traps failed, and the hunter's courage faltered. In the midst of the battle, Cale noticed something remarkable. Leora's pale skin glowed faintly under the moonlight, and her eyes shone with determination. She was no longer the frightened girl he had found in the caravan. She was powerful, her spirit untamed, and she was the key to breaking the curse that had bound him and his pack for generations. When the last of the hunters fled, Cale pulled Leora into his arms. The adrenaline faded, leaving only the warmth of trust and the quiet understanding of their bond. "You have grown," he said, his voice softer than before, "more than I could have imagined." Leora smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. "And you are not so unapproachable after all, Alpha King." Cale's lips curved in a rare smile. "Perhaps I am not." For a long moment they stood together beneath the silver light of the moon, the forest calm once more. The wolves circled them, protective and loyal, acknowledging Leora as one of their own. The bond between her and Cale was no longer just a connection of need, but of choice. They had found each other, and in doing so they had found a path toward freedom from the shadows that had haunted them both. But even as they celebrated, a whisper of danger lingered in the wind. A shadow beyond the forest watched them, patient and silent. The world beyond their sanctuary was not yet ready to accept the light that Leora carried. Cale felt it too, a shiver down his spine. "The peace we have found is fragile," he murmured. "We must be ready. For what comes next?" Leora looked up at him, understanding the unspoken truth. Their journey was far from over. But for the first time she did not feel alone. With Kyle at her side, with the forest and the wolves as her allies, she knew she could face whatever darkness awaited them. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady. Kyle nodded, his hand holding hers tightly. "Together," he agreed. And so, beneath the silver glow of the moon and the watchful eyes of the wolves, a new chapter began. The curse that had shadowed Cale's life was weakening. The forest recognized Leora's strength, and a bond forged in fear and hope now promised redemption and love. Yet the forest whispered, carrying a secret still hidden. Danger lingered beyond the trees, a silent force waiting for the right moment to strike. And as Cale and Leora stood united, they knew that while they had claimed victory in the night, the future would test them in ways even their bond could not yet foresee. But they were ready, because they had each other. And sometimes, that was enough to challenge the darkness.